Welcome to a list of mountains that you, and almost everyone else, will never see in person. These are not famous peaks, and they are not part of any established climbing or trekking routes. Some of these mountains were mapped decades before anyone ever reached them on the ground, and others have still never been reached at all. One is located in a region where access was limited to military or nuclear research personnel, making public visits effectively impossible. Number 2 on this list was discovered through satellite imagery and was first accessed by helicopter. And number 9 is a massive volcanic structure buried beneath Antarctic ice, known almost entirely from remote surveys and never seen from the ground by any human. But let's start with number 1, a mountain in Papua New Guinea that wasn't climbed until 2018, despite rising more than 4,000 meters above sea level. Mount Kabangama is located in the remote interior of Papua New Guinea, within the Star Mountains region near the Indonesian border. Its elevation is just over 4,100 meters, placing it among the higher mountains in the country. Despite its height, Kabangama remained largely absent from human activity for most of the modern era. The mountain was first identified during an Australian geological survey in 1975. At the time, it was marked on survey maps, but the information was limited, and the name itself was not widely recognized outside that documentation. For decades after that survey, there is no record of anyone attempting to reach the mountain. There were no established routes, no nearby roads, and no climbing history associated with it. Local villages in the surrounding region did not have a commonly recorded name for the peak, and there is no evidence that it played a role in regional travel, trade, or cultural practice. Access to Kabangama requires traveling through dense, unmapped rainforest and rugged highland terrain. The approach involves long overland travel on foot through areas without trails, where vegetation is thick and the ground is uneven and unstable. The lack of infrastructure and the difficulty of navigation meant that the mountain remained effectively isolated, even by Papua New Guinea standards. In 2018, a small expedition reached the summit of Mount Kabangama, marking the first documented ascent. Accounts from that expedition describe extremely slow progress, frequent navigation errors, and terrain that made even short distances difficult to cover. The climb itself was not technically complex in the alpine sense, but reaching the mountain at all required significant logistical effort. As of that ascent, Kabangama remains one of the few mountains of its size to have been climbed for the first time in the 21st century. There are no known repeat ascents, no established routes, and no continued presence in mountaineering activity. For most people, Kabangama exists only as a point on a map, with very little visual documentation and almost no direct human interaction. From Papua New Guinea, the next mountain on this list is located on the opposite side of the world, in the interior of northern South America. Unlike Kabangama, it was not identified through ground surveys or expeditions. It first came to attention much later, after researchers noticed an unusual feature while examining satellite imagery. Mount Weiassipu is located in western Guyana, near the border with Brazil, within the Pacaraima Mountains. It rises to approximately 2,144 meters, or 7,035 feet, and takes the form of a flat-topped sandstone plateau, known as a tepui. Unlike most mountains on this list, Weiassipu was not identified through ground exploration. It entered the record in 2003 when it was noticed during aerial observation and later confirmed through satellite imagery. Prior to that, it did not appear on publicly available maps, and there is no evidence of earlier documentation by survey teams or expeditions. The mountain's summit remained completely inaccessible from the ground. Its sides consist of steep, near-vertical quartzite walls rising directly out of dense rainforest. There are no gradual slopes, no ridgelines that lead upward, and no known approach routes from surrounding valleys. The first documented human access occurred in 2012, when researchers were placed on the summit by helicopter. During that visit, scientists descended into a large sinkhole on the plateau and identified previously unknown species, including a frog found only on Weiassipu. This confirmed that the summit had remained biologically isolated for a very long period of time. The first known ascent from the base was completed in 2021, when a small climbing team established a technical route up the mountain's north face. This marked the first time Weiassipu was reached without aerial insertion. The climb required days of preparation, fixed ropes, and sustained climbing on steep rock faces in a tropical environment. Despite that ascent, Weiassipu has not entered any form of regular climbing activity. There are no repeat ascents, no standard routes, and no infrastructure supporting access. The summit remains covered in dense forest, and ground-level photographs of the plateau are extremely limited. Most knowledge about Mount Weiassipu still comes from satellite imagery, brief scientific visits, and a single documented climb. From Guyana, the next mountain on this list lies far to the north, in the Arctic. It is located on a remote island group that was closed to the outside world for much of the 20th century, and public records of human activity there are extremely limited. Mount Kruzenshtern is located on the northern island of the Novaya Zemlya archipelago in the Russian Arctic. It rises to approximately 1,547 meters, or 5,076 feet, and is the highest point on the islands. The mountain was first recorded in 1822 during Arctic surveys conducted by Russian explorers. It was named after Admiral Ivan Kruzenshtern, one of the pioneers of Russian naval exploration. Early records identified the peak and its approximate height, but provided little detail beyond its location and prominence. For most of the 20th century, Mount Kruzenshtern existed inside a region that was largely inaccessible to civilians. Novaya Zemlya became a restricted military zone under the Soviet Union and was used extensively for nuclear weapons testing. During this period, public travel to the islands was prohibited, and foreign access was effectively impossible. Because of these restrictions, there is no clear public record of anyone climbing Mount Kruzenshtern. While scientific and military personnel operated in the region, documentation of ground-level exploration focused on coastal facilities and test areas rather than interior mountains. No verified summit ascents have been published in mountaineering literature. The mountain itself is part of a cold, barren landscape dominated by ice, snow, and exposed rock. Its upper slopes are permanently snow-covered, and the surrounding terrain is shaped by glaciers and extreme weather. Temperatures remain below freezing for much of the year, and strong winds are common even in summer months. Mapping of Mount Kruzenshtern improved only after the Second World War, when aerial photography and satellite imagery became available. Earlier maps contained inaccuracies in both position and naming, and the mountain's name was even omitted or altered on some Soviet-era charts. Modern maps confirm its elevation, but detailed topographic data remains limited. Today, Mount Kruzenshtern remains largely absent from human activity. There are no established routes, no recorded climbs, and no permanent presence anywhere near the mountain. Its isolation is the result of both geography and decades of restricted access, leaving it largely untouched and undocumented. From the Arctic, the next mountain on this list lies near the equator in Central Africa. Unlike Mount Kruzenshtern, it is not isolated by ice or cold, but by dense forest, limited infrastructure, and long-standing regional instability. The region is so isolated that, for decades, it has fueled speculation about unknown animals, including stories of something resembling a dinosaur. Mount Shabbinda is located in the Eastern Democratic Republic of the Congo, within the Itombwe Massif in South Kivu Province. The mountain reaches an elevation of approximately 1,460 meters, or 4,790 feet, and lies inside the Congo rainforest, one of the least explored and least documented regions on Earth. Large sections of this region have never been mapped in detail, and field research has been limited to small localized studies, most of which focus on biodiversity rather than terrain or topography. Mount Tshibinda itself has never been the focus of a dedicated expedition. It appears on regional maps and in geographic and weather databases, but there is no clear public record of any ascent or detailed ground-level survey. Most information about the mountain is indirect, derived from satellite data and sparse regional observations rather than direct exploration. Political instability and long-standing security concerns in eastern Congo have further restricted access. The remoteness of the Congo rainforest has also led to long-standing speculation about what remains undiscovered there. Since the early 20th century, researchers, missionaries, and journalists have recorded local accounts describing a large, unknown animal referred to as Mokele Mbembe, a name used by several communities in the region. These descriptions often portray the animal as large, semi-aquatic, with a long neck and tail, and writers have frequently noted that it resembles what many people would describe as a dinosaur. Multiple expeditions were organized throughout the 20th century to investigate these reports, particularly in remote swamp and river systems of the Congo Basin. None produced physical evidence such as bones, clear photographs, or biological samples. These accounts highlight how limited direct observation has been in parts of the Congo rainforest, where large areas remain rarely visited and poorly surveyed even today. There are no known photographs taken from the summit of Mount Shabbinda, no confirmed climbing history, and no detailed topographic studies available publicly. For most purposes, Mount Shabbinda exists as a named feature within a landscape that remains only partially understood. For the next mountain, we come back to South America, into the Amazon rainforest. Hidden deep in the forest is a flat-topped mountain that has remained largely unexplored and continues to raise questions about what exists on its summit. This is Cerro Sarisariñama, located in southern Venezuela, within the Guyana highlands near the border with Brazil. The mountain rises to approximately 2,350 meters, or 7,710 feet, and is part of a remote plateau system known as Tepuis. For most of modern history, Sarisariñama remained largely unknown outside the region. Dense rainforest surrounds the mountain, and there are no natural access routes leading to the summit. The plateau is isolated by steep rock walls and thick vegetation, making ground approaches extremely difficult. The mountain first drew wider attention in the early 1960s, when pilots flying over the region reported unusual circular formations on its summit. These were later identified as massive sinkholes, hidden beneath the forest canopy and invisible from the ground. In 1974, a scientific expedition reached the summit by helicopter. This marked the first documented human presence on the plateau. During that expedition, researchers discovered multiple enormous sinkholes, some hundreds of meters wide and deep, cutting vertically through the rainforest. Inside these sinkholes, scientists found isolated ecosystems, including plant and animal species not observed anywhere else. Further expeditions in the following years confirmed the scale of these formations. One of the sinkholes was measured at over 300 meters, or nearly 1,000 feet in depth, placing it among the largest known sinkholes on Earth. Access into these cavities required specialized rope systems and was limited to trained scientific teams. Despite these discoveries, Cerro Sarisariñama has never entered public access or tourism. There are no established trails, no climbing routes, and no regular expeditions. Visits remain rare and are restricted primarily to scientific research. Most of what is known about the mountain comes from aerial observation, satellite imagery, and a small number of brief field studies. Ground-level documentation is extremely limited, and large portions of the plateau have never been systematically surveyed. As a result, Cerro Sarisariñama remains a place defined more by what has been observed from above than by sustained human presence on the ground. For the next mountain, we return to Papua New Guinea, this time not to a recently climbed peak, but to one that was mapped decades ago and then largely ignored, with no clear record that anyone has ever reached its summit. Mount Capella is located in the Star Mountains region of western Papua New Guinea, near the border with Indonesia. The mountain reaches an elevation of approximately 3,960 meters, or 12,990 feet. The area surrounding Mount Capella remained poorly documented until the mid-20th century. Large sections of the Star Mountains were still blank or inaccurately represented on maps, and most geographic information came from limited aerial surveys, rather than sustained ground exploration. Mount Capella was first formally recorded during Australian-led survey expeditions in the 1960s, when teams crossed parts of the range to map terrain and identify major peaks. These expeditions were not focused on climbing. Peaks were named and measured, but detailed summit records were rarely kept. There is no confirmed public record of anyone reaching the summit of Mount Capella. No ascent dates, routes, or expedition reports have been documented in mountaineering literature. Unlike other high peaks in Papua New Guinea, Capella never became a climbing objective, and there is no evidence of repeat visits after the initial surveys. Access to the mountain is difficult. The surrounding terrain consists of steep ridges, deep valleys, and dense montane rainforest, with no established roads or trails. Reaching the area requires extended travel on foot through remote highlands, and there has been little incentive for climbers or researchers to return. The mountain also lies close to an international border, which has historically limited movement and discouraged further exploration. As a result, Mount Capella remains a rare case of a high mountain that is known by name and elevation, yet has no clear climbing history and almost no ground-level documentation. For the next mountain, we leave continental land entirely. The location is a small, uninhabited island in the southern Atlantic Ocean, so remote that human presence there has been almost non-existent, and where one of the most unusual volcanic features on Earth was identified without anyone standing nearby. Mount Michael is located on Saunders Island, part of the South Sandwich Islands in the southern Atlantic Ocean. The volcano rises to approximately 843 meters, or 2,766 feet, and dominates an island that has no permanent human population. The island was first charted in the early 19th century, but Mount Michael itself remained largely unexamined for decades. Visits to Saunders Island were extremely rare, limited to occasional naval or scientific voyages, and none approached the summit area in detail. For much of the late 20th century, Mount Michael was known primarily through indirect observation. Satellite data and thermal imagery indicated persistent volcanic activity near the summit, suggesting the presence of a lava lake. At the time, this was unusual, as only a small number of such features were known globally. In 2022, a scientific expedition reached the summit of Mount Michael for the first documented time. The team confirmed the existence of a persistent lava lake within the summit crater, verifying what had previously only been inferred from satellite observations. This made Mount Michael one of the few volcanoes on Earth known to contain such a feature. Even after this confirmation, Mount Michael remains largely unvisited. It stands as an example of a mountain whose defining features were known remotely, long before they were ever seen directly by humans. The next mountain is located even farther south, on another isolated island in the same chain. Unlike the previous volcano, this one remained quiet for most of recorded history, until activity was detected in a place where almost no one was watching. Mount Belinda is located on Montague Island, the largest island in the South Sandwich Archipelago in the southern Atlantic Ocean. The volcano rises to approximately 1,370 meters, or 4,495 feet, and occupies a large portion of the island's interior. For much of the 20th century, Mount Belinda was considered inactive. There were no confirmed historical eruptions, and the volcano attracted little scientific attention. That changed in the late 1990s, when satellite imagery revealed heat anomalies and surface changes consistent with volcanic activity beneath the island's ice cover. In 2001, satellite observations confirmed that Mount Belinda had entered an eruptive phase. Lava flows were detected beneath ice and snow, marking the first recorded eruption of the volcano. At the time, no scientists were present on the island, and the eruption was documented entirely through remote observations. Subsequent analysis showed that volcanic activity continued intermittently for several years. Ice-covered lava flows reshaped parts of the island's surface, but direct field studies were limited or absent due to the island's isolation and difficult access. There is no confirmed record of anyone reaching the summit of Mount Belinda during or after its eruptive period. Mount Belinda remains a rarely visited and poorly documented volcano, known primarily because it erupted in a place where almost no one was there to see it. The last mountain on this list is located in Antarctica. Far from any research station or established travel route, it is a volcanic structure buried beneath ice, where almost everything known about it comes from indirect measurements rather than human observation. Mount Takahe is a large shield volcano located in Marie Byrd Land, one of the most remote regions of Antarctica. The mountain rises to approximately 3,460 meters, or 11,350 feet, above sea level, and is completely surrounded by the West Antarctic ice sheet. The volcano was first identified during aerial surveys in the mid-20th century, when large volcanic features beneath the ice were mapped using radar and other geophysical techniques. Unlike coastal Antarctic mountains, Mount Takahe lies deep in the interior, hundreds of kilometers from the nearest permanent research presence. The volcano is largely covered by ice, and its surface features are poorly defined. Most information about its size, shape, and structure comes from radar imaging and satellite data, rather than detailed field mapping. Ground-level photographs of the mountain are extremely limited or non-existent in public records. Mount Takahe remains an example of a mountain known primarily through instruments rather than experience. Its existence is well established, but its physical presence has almost never intersected with human observation. All of the mountains in this video exist on the same planet we live on. It raises a simple question: how much of the Earth do we actually know, if places like these can still exist almost entirely outside human experience. Thanks for watching.